Hello, I'm Josh, and I'm back with another film to talk about. And I've got a pretty interesting one for you today. It's one of my favorites. It is Charles Laughton's 1955 film, Night of the Hunter. Night of the Hunter is a kind of Southern Gothic fable about two siblings, John and Pearl, who are hunted by an evil preacher named Harry Powell. However, Reverend Powell is not a real preacher. It is merely a disguise he uses to help him with his actual business, which is marrying rich widows and then killing them and taking their money. So when Harry Powell hears that John and Pearl's father, who happens to be his cellmate, stole a large amount of money which has never been recovered, Powell decides upon his release to move to the town and marry the children's mother, after their father was hung for the men he killed in the robbery, and everyone falls for Reverend Powell's guise. All except Jim, who recalls his promise to his father not to reveal where the money was hidden, which happens to be in Pearl's doll. And the film becomes this sort of cat and mouse chase as Harry Powell chases after John and Pearl in search of the money. So as you can already see, one of the main things that sticks out to most people about this film is just the cinematography and the atmosphere. I mean, just looking at this film, you can see it's about as timeless as you can get. There's nothing that really compares to it, at least at the time. It really uses the visuals to help push that fable/storybook aspect of it, like one of the grim fairy tales, or as the director Charles Laughton put it, a nightmarish Mother Goose story. Everything is exaggerated and stylized. Laughton wanted the film to be from the children's perspective, specifically John's. And so you can actually see the world changing in appearance around the children as their situation changes. And I don't think you need me to tell you how visually stunning this film is. One scene that really sticks out is when they're sailing down the river in the small boat. It's just incredible. So obviously, a big aspect of the look has to be credited to the cinematographer, Stanley Cortez. And by this time, Cortez was a very popular cinematographer. He'd worked with some big names like Orson Welles and Fritz Lang, and would go on to work with Samuel Fuller as well. So he was pretty familiar with this kind of film noir/German expressionistic kind of look that they were going for in this film, with the heavy shadows and having everything being very exaggerated. Cortez was already very good at this. Like with the Orson Welles film that he shot, The Magnificent Ambersons, that has some beautiful scenes. Cortez would spend a lot of time perfecting the lighting in these scenes, and so apparently on Magnificent Ambersons, a few other cinematographers had to be brought in to speed up production, but maybe I'll cover that in a later episode. Basically, I'm saying Stanley Cortez was a perfectionist, and so since Night of the Hunter was such a unique film in terms of its visuals, they didn't have to worry too much about making it look realistic. So Cortez could really just go to town with the visuals and make it look as beautiful as he could. And I love how much Lawton acknowledges and appreciates these visuals and pulls back so often to let them sink in. And that kind of brings me to another reason why this film is so unique. It is the one and only film directed by Charles Laughton. Now I'm sure, especially today, a lot of you, or at least several of you, are probably wondering, okay, who's Charles Laughton? So Charles Laughton was a very famous actor back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. He started working in like the very late 20s, but that's kind of where he caught on, was in the 30s, specifically with The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He gave a very memorable performance as Quasimodo in one of the early sound adaptations of it. And later on in his career, he would take generally more supporting roles. I think most people nowadays, if they were to see him, it would likely be in Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus. But aside from his acting, Lawton was also a very accomplished theater director. But he had never actually done a film until Night of the Hunter came along. And he was clearly the perfect choice for this film. He was not given a huge budget for the film, and so it was made pretty clear early on that they would have to film a lot of the outdoor scenes in a studio. Now, especially back then, filming your outdoor scenes in a studio pretty much automatically makes your film look fake. I mean, bigger productions can do tricks to fix this problem, but if you look at some of the older films, and especially the TV shows from the 50s and 60s, it's pretty easy to see when they're actually on location and when they're just on a set that's made to match the location. So instead of trying to fake it and make it look like they were actually on location, Lawton made the interesting choice to emphasize the fact that the sets were not real. They seem to take from some of the German expressionist films from back in the day, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or even some of the old 30s monster films like Frankenstein. They make it pretty clear they're on sets, and they basically use the surroundings to emphasize the emotions that you're supposed to be feeling. So they really took what could have easily been seen as a shortcoming and turned it into one of the best aspects of the film. And as beautiful as the visuals are, one can't forget how quotable the script is as well. Part of it is just how well Robert Mitchum and the other actors play their roles. But the way they kind of weave together this old biblical language just makes the film feel so timeless and memorable.
Where's she at?
Down the river somewhere, Parkersburg, maybe Cincinnati. One of them Sodoms of the Ohio River.
She took them kids with her?
Oh, heaven only knows what unholy sights and sounds them innocent little babes has heard in the dens of perdition where she dragged them.
Right funny, ain't it, how they rode all the way upriver in a 10-foot John boat.
And in this way, it shows some resemblance to some of the Coen brothers films, like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and Raising Arizona. And story-wise, it just emphasizes this feeling that you're being told this old fable. The film is based on a novel by the same name written by Davis Grubb, and the script was written by writer James Agee, who had adapted the script for John Huston's The African Queen a few years earlier. Agee wrote a very long draft of the script. It came out about 270 pages, and if you don't know, a normal script is about 90 to 120, with one page roughly equaling 1 minute of film. And so Charles Laughton himself actually went uncredited and did some rewrites to economize the story and bring the length down. And one interesting area of inspiration that Charles Laughton drew from was silent films, specifically the films of D.W. Griffith. Now, not all aspects of D.W. Griffith's films should be emulated, but Lawton recalled that when watching a Griffith film, audiences would be on the edge of their seat, completely gripped by what they were seeing. And Lawton sought to rekindle this feeling in audiences. So he studied several of Griffith's films and techniques, such as cross-cutting during the chase, so that the villain seems to be just behind the hero, while the hero is just barely staying out of reach. This also led to Lawton casting silent screen legend Lillian Gish in the role of Rachel Cooper, the kind old woman that takes in and protects John and Pearl. And along with the cinematography, writing, and direction, the music is just perfect as well. I mean, you got Walter Schumann, who's mainly known for writing the Dragnet theme song. But his music just adds a whole new layer to the visuals. Since Lawton was trying to make Night of the Hunter feel like a silent film, the music obviously plays a very important role. And to be honest, you could probably do a whole video on just how revolutionary the sound editing in this film is. Nobody seems to talk about it much because of how great Robert Mitchum is and how great the visuals are, but Charles Laughton really uses sound in this film in an incredibly powerful way, especially when thinking that this film came out in 1955. He knows when to use music to make moments more powerful, and he also knows when to take it away and give the film an eerie silence as you hear a lone voice off in the distance.
Leaning, on the everlasting arm.
And there are also some memorable transitions carried mostly through sound as well. But I don't want to give too much away in case you haven't seen it, because it's really cool to experience for yourself. So here we have finally come to the actors, and let me just say, everybody gives a perfect performance in this film. I mean, the kids are some of the best child actors outside of the Innocents, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Lillian Gish as Miss Cooper. The scene with her in the rocking chair holding a shotgun, singing with the Reverend who is just outside, has to be one of the most memorable things I think I've ever seen in a film. And Night of the Hunter is packed full of other great actors as well. I mean, you've got Shelley Winters, James Gleason, Peter Graves, just to name a few. But believe me, everyone just fits their roles. This feels perfectly cast. But of course, out of all the standout roles in this film, Robert Mitchum really takes the cake as Harry Powell. I mean, he goes all out on this one. Every mannerism and inflection is just perfectly controlled. You really just have to see it for yourself. He can be very terrifying at some points, as well as being charming in this kind of creepy, manipulative way. The way he tricks everyone in the town while you just watch makes you feel kind of powerless and really helps you identify with the kids. And one of the interesting things about Reverend Powell, now this is kind of a spoiler, not really, but I'll put a timestamp if you want to skip ahead of this. But one of the things that's interesting about Reverend Powell is that in reality, he's not really very competent. I mean, he stumbles over jars, gets his fingers crushed in a doorway. He really shows himself to be weak around stronger-willed adults like Miss Cooper. And so when thinking about it, it really makes sense why he chooses to go after impressionable widows and smaller children. But since we were watching the film through the eyes of the boy John, he really becomes one of the scariest and most memorable villains in film history. And that's really no exaggeration either. A few years back, the American Film Institute did a poll of the greatest heroes and villains, and Harry Powell was right up there, right next to Mitchum's other memorable villain role, Cape Fear's Max Cady. It's interesting, if you're familiar with Mitchum's work, you know he's usually known for playing these kind of film noir detectives or characters who, you know, are very cool, as well as very calm, and he has this kind of don't care attitude. But yeah, he's mainly known for playing heroes. So it's really interesting that his two most memorable roles in film history are actually pretty much his only two attempts at playing villains. So yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting aspect of this. But I'm gonna cut myself off there, because I could really go on and on talking about this film and just everything about it. It's been one of my favorites since I first watched it. Interestingly enough, it was a pretty big flop when it came out. It's pretty exciting when you watch it, but apparently when some of the studio heads saw a screening of it, they categorized it more as an art film, I guess because of the expressionistic look of it. And so they thought, this is a bit too artsy for us. And so they kind of put it in theaters without really a whole lot of marketing to it. And so it was a pretty big flop, and this really hurt Charles Laughton. He thought it was going to be a hit. And so sadly, that's the main reason this is his only film. But thankfully, it's since been regarded as a classic, as newer generations would see it on TV. Film critic Roger Ebert has it on his great movies list, and it has since been regarded as a highly influential film, with a countless number of prominent film directors such as Robert Altman, Guillermo del Toro, the Coen brothers, Martin Scorsese, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, and Spike Lee to name a few. Spike Lee, in fact, uses the speech Robert Mitchum gives in the film to explain his knuckle tattoos in his own film Do the Right Thing.
Would you like me to tell you the little story of right hand, left hand?
Let me tell you the story of right hand, left hand.
The story of good and evil?
It's a tale of good and evil.
H-A-T-E.
It was with this hand that Cain iced his brother.
L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts?
They go straight to the soul of man. The right hand.
The hand of love. Now watch and I'll show you the story of life.
Static.
So if you'd like to watch The Night of the Hunter, it's available pretty much everywhere digitally, as a rent or buy option. Physically though, there are only really a couple. This one here is from the Criterion Collection, and it's really the preferred version. It has a pretty high quality restoration of it, so if you want to see it the best way you can, this is really the way you want to go. It's also got tons of interviews, commentaries, documentaries, along with a whole nother disc with a film called Charles Laughton Directs. And that actually comes from a ton of film that was discovered at Charles Laughton's house that was basically most of the unedited footage from Night of the Hunter. And so something he would do, which he was taking from the silent films, is he would keep the film rolling for the entire reel, and they would basically just do the scene over and over again without cutting. And so because of that, that footage is kind of interesting because you can actually hear him giving directions, and you can see people do their full lines, sometimes lines would get edited out, or you'd hear people do multiple takes of lines. There's also a scene in the beginning where they show them setting up a rear projected screen, which is kind of neat. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It feels like you're actually there on set while they're making it, and they pretty much show you the entire film in that way. So I think checking that out is definitely worth it for fans or people who are interested in filmmaking, as you are basically watching the film being made kind of in front of you. But that being said, I don't think everybody's going to be interested in it. I mean, essentially, it's 2.5 hours of largely unedited clips that are strung together with a bit of context dropped in from a narrator. I mean, they edit down the footage some, but if you're not really into filmmaking, I don't know how interested you would be in that. So I'm not really sure if that's a selling point for everyone, but it definitely makes for a really cool bonus feature. It makes this set a really complete package for fans of the film. But otherwise, there are a few cheaper DVDs out there if you just want to watch the film. They may not look as great as this or have all the features, but it's still Night of the Hunter, so you can't really go wrong there. And now for this week's question. And I'm wondering, what is the most beautiful film you've seen? I'm speaking strictly visuals on this one. I mean, I think Night of the Hunter makes a pretty strong case for itself, but I'm interested in what you think. There are a lot of good-looking films out there with shots so perfect you just want to hang them up on your wall. But yeah, maybe put one or two of your favorites in the comments section down below and start discussing. Remember to hit the like button below if you like this video and subscribe if you want to see more. Have a great rest of your day, and remember to keep watching movies. Alright, I'll see you next week. Oh, and you're probably wondering, are we in December now? Why aren't you talking about a nice Christmas movie? And if you're wondering that, I just say check out the movie and you'll see why.
What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms.
Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, safe and secure from